It's so interesting.
It's so interesting.
Interesting.
It's interesting.
Welcome to It's So Interesting, where people talk about their work and life experience. I am George Spitzer. I have with me today Caitlin Stewart, who is an English teacher and trainer at an English school in Japan. Welcome to It's So Interesting. First of all, how many teachers does it have?
In the region where I'm working, there's about, 120 teachers that are coming from abroad, but then there are also about 60 teachers who are Japanese that are teaching English as well.
And that's where your training part comes in. You're helping them
Well, I'm actually training the teachers who are coming from abroad.
to get the format for teaching Japanese students English.
Yes, exactly.
I see.
Yeah.
How long have you been at this school?
I've been working there for almost 7 years.
Obviously you must like it because you've been doing it for 7 years.
Yeah, definitely.
What's the part of it that you enjoy the most? The fact that you're in Japan you are an American citizen.
Right.
Since this is an audio program, I only will describe you as blonde, white, American.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're definitely not Japanese. You can't tell that you've even been there.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're there, you see, then you must speak some Japanese after being there for 7 years.
Right, yeah.
Have you been taking Japanese courses yourself, or are you just picking it up as you go along?
It's been a combination of different things that I've tried, but I started out going to a community center near where I lived, and they had free classes taught by volunteer teachers who are all retired old Japanese women and men. They were really cute, and I started doing that for a couple of years, and then when I got more serious about it, I started taking private lessons in cafes with teachers I found on the internet, and then I went to a language school, like basically full-time, 5 days a week for about a year. That was a couple years ago.
So you're fluent in Japanese now?
Not yet, but I really want to be.
You're probably 90% fluent.
I don't know. Maybe not quite.
I'll rephrase the question, as lawyers are famous for saying, and that is, if you're speaking Japanese to someone on the street, could they tell that's not your native language?
Oh,
If
definitely.
They can.
Yeah, they can.
Uh-huh.
But I guess it's also hard because they see my face.
On the phone, can people tell you?
I think they can, yeah.
Well, yeah, after 7 years of immersion by living there. So now, where is this? In Tokyo or somewhere?
In Tokyo, yeah.
You're in Tokyo.
Smack in the middle.
Is this a school that's a chain, or is it a private school?
It's a private school, but they are pretty large. They have branch schools all over Tokyo and even in the Osaka area and like other areas of Japan. So it's pretty big.
And what is its name?
Its name is ECC.
Of the 60 or so teachers that are in that particular branch that you're in, half are Japanese and half are Anglos?
So I'm working in the headquarters right now in Tokyo, and that headquarters oversees about 70 schools in the Tokyo area and the outlying regions of Tokyo. I only teach 1 day a week.
Teaching.
I only teach Japanese students once a week at one school.
That's now. When you first started, you were a full-time teacher?
Yeah, so at that time I was teaching at 5 different schools. Every day was a different school.
So let's move into your wishes and your hopes for what you're doing. You would like to do this the rest of your life?
In terms of the job, I really enjoy what I'm doing. Obviously, I think because I'm still doing it, and I think that's part of the reason I'm still in Japan is because I loved the job so much.
In other words, if you lost a job, you might not stay in Japan.
Definitely. I think that's a big possibility. So I really enjoy teaching, and lately I've been doing a lot of training and kind of working in the office and writing reports and things like that. So it's been a lot more variety lately, and I enjoy it a lot.
If an adult Japanese person walks into the school, sign up to learn English, does it after work, so it's not there during the day. Are these mostly night students, or are they?
Yeah, actually, most of the teachers start work at 3:30 and finish around 9:30.
So most of the students are coming in after work, so to
exactly,
speak.
after work, after school.
What I started to ask, if someone signs up not knowing a word of English, how quickly do they speak enough English to be able to have a conversation without stumbling around? I'm not saying speaking as fluently as you and I are right now,
Right.
but to be able to carry on a conversation.
I think it depends a lot on the student, actually, on how motivated they are, to be honest, and how much work they're willing to put in. Even with the best teacher, if somebody doesn't preview and review and try to do some work at home as well, because most of the students only take a lesson once a week for an hour at the most, maybe 2 hours.
And there's no English being spoken at home.
Exactly, so that's their only exposure to it. So it can be actually quite a slow process if you really do a lot at home as well.
Do you encourage students to get together to speak English after hours? I mean, you can teach English an hour a week, but people got to speak it.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
So, I mean, we encourage them to talk to their classmates, like, before and after the lesson in the lobby, go out and meet people. I mean, there are a lot of foreigners in Tokyo, actually, so just go out and meet people. We give them suggestions of TV shows and radio shows to watch or listen to practice.
Which are in English? Mm-hmm. With subtitles in Japanese?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, I see. I see. Have you found any trends in all your time there as to why you have people signing up to learn English? I mean, what's the motivation to learn English? Is there generalization, or are there certain kinds of categories?
A few different categories. I guess one is people who think they need it for work, and they tend to be a little kind of because they have to be there. Then there are some who really want to travel abroad, and they really want to use English when they're traveling. Other people have said they really want to understand the movies and the TV shows that they're watching, because I think a lot of Japanese people watch stuff coming out of the U.S., and they want to understand it. So
I don't know a word of Japanese. I'm not going to ask you to say anything in Japanese because it would be meaningless to me or anyone else, pretty much. But it is an entirely different language than a Roman-based language, just like English or Spanish or Portuguese or even German. They're all Romance languages. Japanese has nothing in common. Obviously, the language can be learned. A Japanese person can learn English, otherwise you would be out of a job.
Right.
But is it easy, as I'm asking you?
No. Certain aspects are. I think learning pronunciation and things like that, because it's a very phonetic language.
Is there an alphabet?
Yeah. Not so big. They have 3 different systems of writing, and 2 of them are phonetic, and so it's very limited in the sounds that they make, actually. But then they also have the Chinese characters that they're using as well. They're kind of using them like in a combination.
These are Chinese characters. So the Japanese characters I see in various places are the same kind of characters that the Chinese use?
Yeah, they borrowed them from China all those years ago, but I think that they have kind of evolved to be a little bit different. So, I mean, when I was learning alongside some Chinese classmates in the Japanese language school, they kept making mistakes because they were like, in my language it's written this way, and it's just, one line is a little bit different, and they were finding that really frustrating.
Would it be a parallel of saying, like, someone who spoke Spanish, who comes across someone who knows Portuguese? It's almost all the same Latin root words and the conjugations and all this, and the letters look the same with a few exceptions. In other words, a Japanese person can read some Chinese stuff, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think when they look at each other's written language, they can understand a lot of it.
And verbally, but not verbally.
But not verbally, yeah. The sounds are totally different.
In some languages, on the Romance side, what's written is a different structure and formality from the vernacular. Do you have that in Japanese?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a very hierarchical society. Not so much as it used to be, but because of that, there's like many layers of politeness, and depending on who you talk to and who is higher than who, you have to use a totally different set of vocabulary sometimes. It's really tough.
I see.
So.
I want to move into talking a bit about your living in Japan. Is there a word for what describes you? I mean, you're obviously not Japanese.
Right.
So what do the Japanese call you? Or what do America... I mean, what is your label? You're not a tourist. You're not a visitor.
They call me a foreigner.
You're a foreigner. That's how they describe Anglos living in Japan. A foreigner.
Or basically anybody that's... Well, actually, I don't want to say anybody that's not Japanese, but basically all of us are foreigners. The word is gaijin, but that's what they call us. But I think that when they say that word, they are imagining a white person.
Are you oftentimes, in terms of your daily life and commuting to work, commuting to your home, you live in Tokyo, it's a big city, so you go to a residential section, or do you actually live downtown?
I don't live downtown, but I can get to downtown very quickly, about 10 minutes by train.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So, yeah.
When you're traveling around, are you the only Gaijin there? Or how unusual are you there in daily life? People all stare, oh, look at this, she's a foreigner.
Well, it's funny. When I first moved to the neighborhood that I'm living in now, I didn't really see any other foreigners. But lately I'm starting to bump into a lot more of them when I'm walking to and from the train station. So I noticed that the numbers are increasing again. I think there was a big earthquake disaster, and I think a lot of people, moved away in that time. But since then, more and more people have been kind of coming back and living here again. So. And
when you walk around in the streets or go shopping for food, are you invisible, or do people give you sideways glances? Who is this foreigner? How much do you feel like you stick out like a sore thumb after 7 years there?
Not so much. It depends. Some people do sort of look at you like, oh, it's a foreigner. Looks very surprised and kind of you're looking at you. It tends to be much older people or children, and then everybody else sort of avoids eye contact and pretends like they don't notice you. So I do appreciate it when people just speak to me in Japanese and just treat me like I'm one of the neighbors, just somebody who lives there.
And do they politely wait for you to utter something for them to realize they know Japanese? Or they assume you don't know any Japanese?
Depends on the person. In my neighborhood, it's a pretty small neighborhood. There aren't a lot of shops. It's very local, so they usually just speak to me in Japanese because they can't do the English thing. Yeah. But if I just go 10 minutes into Shinjuku, which is like a big bustling station, it's one of the biggest stations in the world, I think, there are a lot more foreigners and people who speak English, so a lot of the time they do just start speaking to me in English. And I get a little disappointed. Oh, okay, can't practice my Japanese. But
right. And it's a terrible habit here in the U.S. when you're speaking to someone, I guess you would call who's a foreigner here,
right,
that you speak in a louder voice because it makes you understand it better and all this. Do you get the same situation in Japan?
No, actually, it's funny. A lot of the time, I'll walk up, like in a Starbucks or something, I'll walk up to the register to order my coffee, and the person kind of looks up and then realizes, they kind of freeze and they see, oh, she's white. Uh-oh, she must be a tourist. Oh, no. And they get pretty nervous, and you can kind of see them visibly, like, sweating and shaking. Oh, wow. And they're like, one moment, please. And they walk away, and then somebody else comes back and is like, sorry, change, And they start trying to speak English, but, you can see the other person standing behind them sort of like twiddling their thumbs, looking really nervous, like I couldn't do it, so they wanted this person to speak the English for them.
And never gave themselves the opportunity to find out that you could speak Japanese.
Yeah, exactly. And then I start speaking Japanese to that person, and they look back at their coworker like, she speaks Japanese. What are you doing? It was fine. You could have just served her.
Other than teaching in your school. Do you speak English at all during your private life? Actually,
I do a fair bit because I have a lot of foreign friends, I guess is what you call them. But I also have a lot of Japanese friends who speak a lot of English and are quite good at it. So we try to kind of balance depending on our levels. Sometimes we speak more English, sometimes we speak more Japanese, but depending on who it is, we try to mix.
So you have a total mix, basically day and night, private and business, of Japanese and English. Would I be fair to either say or ask you that you're a truly bilingual person?
I feel like I still have a long way to go in Japanese, and there's just still so much I don't know and things I can't express still, so I hesitate to say that I'm bilingual, but I'm getting there.
It's sort of a long way around of you saying yes.
No, okay. I don't know. I want to be, but...
Well, I'll rephrase the question. When you listen to Japanese radio...
it's still hard.
It's still hard.
Yeah.
If you watch a Japanese film...
I need subtitles, at least in Japanese. But even then, I may have to kind of stop it and be, oh, wait, what did he just say? So it depends on the topic, and my vocabulary is stronger depending on the topic.
Now, if you ever do move back to the United States, which you don't know because life makes turns, how long do you think you'll be able to retain your Japanese knowledge? Is this something, a language where if you don't use it for a few months, it's gone? Definitely,
because I think when I was going to the Japanese language school, I learned a lot in that time, and I was using it every day for hours a day, and I was writing essays in Japanese and all in full kanji Chinese characters, and it was really exciting. And then I quit that school to kind of move on to the position that I'm in now at work. And I wasn't really using Japanese very much anymore at that point. And that was like, I've forgotten a lot since then. I've noticed that. Like, I can't write in Japanese anymore. I've forgotten how to write all of the characters, even the really simple ones. I can read them, but I can't write them.
Are you going to do something about it?
I'm thinking about it. I mean, I've been taking private lessons again lately in a coffee shop once a week. And I've been writing essays at home on my computer, at least, just to kind of keep up.
Is there a large community of Anglo-English teachers in Tokyo, or are you very unusual?
I think there's a lot of them. And I think especially if you see someone that looks like me, blonde hair, blue eyes, they are probably an English teacher. That's the assumption.
I see.
If somebody is doing some other kind of work, it is very rare, actually. And it's kind of like, oh, wow, you're not an English teacher? How did you do that?
So the label is automatic.
Yeah.
I see.
Quite a bit.
And this is generalizations. There are always exceptions in any society or community you live in. But in your case, is there any aggro for your being in a foreign country as a foreigner? Would people rather, is the undercurrent, they would rather you just be away and gone?
Oh. I do feel that people are pretty welcoming overall, especially when they find out I'm American, surprisingly. They actually really like Americans right now. And I think a lot of people are interested in practicing their English. So, they would love a chance to talk to me in English.
And of course, you would love a chance to talk in Japanese.
Exactly, so that can be a conflict sometimes. But usually we kind of figure out whose level is higher, and then we go with that language usually.
So you like to teach English in a Japanese situation. Been doing it for 7 years. You're now a trainer of other teachers who may not be Anglos of English to Japanese people. What do you think will be next? Well, let's put it this way. I don't want to put you in the spot because everyone's career is options. But what are the options for you there?
I could stay at that company and explore other positions, try to move up into a more managerial position or something like that. Lately, they've been opening up opportunities for foreigners to be staff members in the schools, which means actually like using Japanese with the customers, which is kind of a big deal because you have to use that very polite Japanese that's so hard to use. I've thought about going back to school and really getting into the education side of it as well. There's also the training and kind of like HR, that kind of side of it as well interests me as well. So I've considered trying to apply that to other fields or other companies, even maybe in the US if I ever go back. So I feel like there are a lot of different directions I could go in still, which is nice.
Now, I should point out to the so interesting audience here that we are doing this interview in the U.S. because you're visiting your family here in the U.S. I'm not in Japan doing this interview. And we're doing this face-to-face. This is no digital telephone thing. When you live where you are your houses or your apartments traditional, or you wouldn't in terms of different architecture, the paper doors and all that sort of stuff? Or do you just live in an Anglo concrete apartment complex?
There are a lot of those. Mine is a little bit weird. I guess it's closer to the apartment complex kind of thing. It does look pretty Western on the outside, but it kind of looks like a little Western house that's been split up into a bunch of apartments that I've got. Well, they're not real, but technically wooden floors and things like that. So I do have one like sliding door that's separating my bedroom and my kitchen. But overall, it looks pretty Western. Just the ceilings are really low, and you take your shoes off when you come in the entrance and things like that.
Anywhere, not just your own place, right?
Yeah.
So you must wear shoes that will tie up.
Usually, yep.
That's one thing you lost. Okay.
Yeah, such a hassle.
What is it about living in Tokyo as an American that you enjoy? I mean, first of all, you're not married at this point.
Right.
So obviously you have a different social life than if you were.
There are a lot of things I like about Japan. There's something about the society. It's just very well ordered and convenient, and everyone is really, really nice to each other. It's just a very peaceful country and very easy to live in. So I like that aspect of it.
It's quite civilized then.
Yeah, I guess.
Which is another way of saying you feel safe there.
Well, yeah, that's definitely an aspect of it. But I mean, also just like the train system is really amazing, I think. And I also really like going to the hot springs, and I love karaoke and things like that.
Karaoke?
Yeah, I absolutely love it.
And the group of people you do it with like you doing it? And do you sing it in Japanese songs or English, American songs?
Mostly English songs, but, you know, I've added a few Japanese songs to my repertoire that I'm not too afraid to sing in front of people, but practiced a bit at home, maybe.
I see. Interesting. Have you been to other parts of Japan just to visit, or have you been Tokyo-centric?
I've been trying to get out and see as much of Japan as I can. There's still a lot of places I haven't been to yet, but...
Are they markedly different than Tokyo? I mean, is Tokyo its own system versus the rest of Japan? Or?
Tokyo is a really big city. Obviously, the countryside is going to be quite different. But I do kind of feel like wherever you go, the countryside is sort of the countryside. So it's not super different, but I guess, you know, a lot of chain stores are opening up all over Japan, just like it is here in the U.S. So that's a little bit sad to see.
Yeah, because
globalization.
you know what it's like here in the U.S. and all the franchises and box stores, and you mentioned Starbucks. When you are in Tokyo, it's all the same thing?
A lot of it, yeah.
So.
Or maybe different chains than here, but they are expanding and spreading, and I can see a lot of local businesses are closing up and disappearing, and it's kind of a shame.
Sort of like Main Street USA is sort of disappearing.
Exactly.
Moving into franchises.
Yeah, and actually, you know, they have kind of a real problem with the population declining and aging. A lot of people are moving from the countryside into the cities. So a lot of the time when I go into the countryside, it's just a lot of ghost towns lately.
Really?
Yeah.
It's not the exception, it's the rule.
Well, more and more so lately, yeah. I mean, not everywhere, but there are a lot of them.
Population's quite dense in Japan in general.
I think the majority of it is in the cities lately.
Japanese economy has had, over the past decade, and who knows in the future, been stagnant. Is that something you have to deal with every day, or is it sort of just a noise out there?
I don't really notice it. It doesn't seem like it. I mean, I guess it hasn't really changed so much while I've been living there.
Now, are you local enough now to have a Japanese driver's license?
Not yet, but I'm looking into it.
So you don't really need a car?
No, I don't. It would only be for travel, really. Weekend trips or something.
Most Japanese people in Tokyo don't have a car or do have a car?
I'd say that's right. They don't have them.
Because they have a good transport system.
Yeah.
So you don't have a car because you couldn't get one. You don't have a car because you really don't need one. Or at least, I should say, you don't have a car. You don't have a driver's license to rent a car or use a car.
Yeah.
Because you really don't need it.
Yeah, I don't need it. Definitely.
After 7 years, I can see that. Yeah.
I mean, the train system is absolutely amazing. Even if you live in the suburbs, I think you don't even need a car, really. So you can walk everywhere.
How cold does it get in Tokyo in winter?
It's actually not that different from New York. Maybe New York is a little bit colder. Yeah, overall, it's quite similar.
Really?
Yeah.
And you have 4 seasons and all
Yeah,
that.
they're very proud of them, the 4 seasons. It's funny.
How do you mean?
Like, a lot of times when I ask students about the weather here, they're like, oh, well, we have 4 seasons. Have you ever experienced 4 seasons before? And I'm like, yeah, I'm from New York. And they're like, wait, do you have 4 seasons there? And I'm like, yeah, we do. So I'm always surprised by that they sometimes don't know that other countries have 4 seasons as well. Not everybody, says that, but I have had those kinds of conversations. It was pretty funny.
In your chat, you have the formal courses and the sentences and the structures and all that sort of thing. But there's some things you do want to talk about with them. In class, of course. Have you been surprised with things you've learned anything about from any of the students that you had no expectation of?
People's impressions of people outside of Japan, for example, when we're talking about travel and have you been here, have you been there? A lot of them are afraid to go to New York, actually, because they think it's so dangerous and everybody has guns. And I'm like, nope, I don't have a gun. Nobody I know really has a gun, It's not like that. And they're like, oh, really? Oh, okay. Oh, maybe I should go there. I was really afraid of it, so I just thought that was interesting.
So they're working on stereotypes.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I'm sure if they, get out and travel, they'll see that it's different.
Thank you for your time with me.
Okay.
And it's been